Hello, welcome to the Abundance Workshops. I'm Aisha McGowan, a professional cyclist for Live Racing Tech Find, and also the founder and program director of A Quick Brown Fox. A Quick Brown Fox works to build space and create opportunities for Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color to thrive in cycling and in the outdoors. Through programs, content, and initiatives, we continue to show how truly we believe that representation matters. Today, we are presenting Building Bike Community, Solidarity and Liberation, moderated by Guarina Lopez, featuring guest panelists Mars L. Salvador Pinto Majaro, Carmen Aiken, and Keisha Roberson. We also want to thank our longtime sponsors, Live, Zwift, and SRAM for supporting us over the years in our work towards creating and maintaining an authentically inclusive cycling community. This year, the Abundance Project is ecstatic to be a beneficiary of a Bronco Wild Fund grant and help further its mission to build a legacy of access to the outdoors. Bronco Wild Fund has teamed up with like-minded collaborators, agencies, organizations, and everyday heroes devoted to keeping the great outdoors great. A portion of the profits from every Bronco sold goes directly to Bronco Wild Fund collaborator initiatives like this one. Thanks so much to Bronco Wild Fund for helping us present the Abundance Workshops in 2023. Give a warm welcome to Guarina, Marzel, Carmen, and Keisha, and enjoy this presentation of Building Bike Community, Solidarity, and Liberation.
All right, here we go. Thank you, Aisha, for that amazing introduction. And thank you, everyone, today for joining us. I am going to be covering these topics. Let me just go to the first slide. Be covering these topics that you see on the screen so we can learn how to build and sustain equitable and caring communities. My hope is to strive for solidarity. You can also call that reciprocity, so that we can all feel a sense of freedom in the spaces we exist in. So to start, I want to thank the Abundance Workshop, and I will introduce the panel once again. We have Keisha Roberson, Marzel, Salvador Pinto Mojaro, and Carmen Aiken. I'm going to be starting off the panel, and then when they take their turns, they will give you a longer introduction of the work that they do. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Guarina Lopez, and I'm from the Pascua Yaqui tribe in Tucson, Arizona, and I currently live in Washington, D.C., which is Piscataway territory. I'm an artist, an activist, and an athlete. I run, I bike, I swim, and I practice yoga. In my personal life for a very long time, I've been a writer and a photographer and a storyteller, and I'm sharing this with you because, and I'll explain later, this is also the foundations of building Native Women Ride. I used my craft as a storyteller. I'm also a community advocate and an organizer, mainly within Indigenous communities for human and land rights. I'm a mother, and I'm also the founder of Native Women Ride. And I'll give you a short version of the manifesto, basically, of Native Women Ride. So the goal of Native Women Ride is to build community, educate about the land we ride on, and raise awareness about issues impacting our communities. Native Women Ride supports all Native and Indigenous people, but centers femme, trans, women, girls, non-binary, and two-spirit relatives. So my aim in building Native Women Ride was using the tools that I'd learned over the years as an organizer, and figuring out how to do that in social media in a culturally sensitive way. Okay. So I'm going to share with you how I built Native Women Ride and The reason why I invited Marzel, Carmen, and Keisha onto the panel is because each of them has supported me along the way over the years in various different ways, and they'll be sharing their skill sets. And so something that I talk about in one of the first slides that I'll get into again is this idea of barter and mutual aid. And in order to build and sustain communities where we don't have to rely on corporations, for example, is we put more of our care into our community, and this idea of reciprocity is that I can offer a skill set that I have, and someone else can offer a skill set that they have, to help support and uplift everyone's communities at the same time. So like I said, the panelists will be sharing what their expertises are. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about building Native Women Ride and how I have heavily relied on my friends, on my community, and why I believe it was necessary to do that. And, so if you're interested in building a community of any kind, I would say, for me, as an Indigenous person, the antithesis of indigeneity is individualism. And so I'm always thinking about, the decisions that I make, how they will impact, my community, and whether or not it's my actual Indigenous community, whether it's my neighbors, whether it's the people that I'm riding bikes with or sharing space with. And again, once again, this idea of reciprocity, of the way that I'm acting in community, hopefully is positive. So when I first decided to build or start Native Women Ride, it was very simple. I was looking for other Native folks on bikes. I had already been working in the running space, doing kind of similar things. I was working with Indigenous runners who were doing the same thing there. We were kind of, it was pretty obvious that, running was a very white space. It had kind of a stereotype of a thin white blonde woman on the cover of magazines that were constantly being represented by brands. And as Indigenous runners of all sizes and abilities, we went out there to kind of disrupt that idea, that stereotype. And so for a number of years, I had already been working in the running space, learning that language, understanding how to use social media, and then prior to the pandemic, working as an activist in community on the ground, I was able to bring together these two sets of experiences. I still had to learn about social media in the sense that it's not a safe space. And, we open ourselves up to criticisms, to trolling, to people who aren't supportive of the work that you're doing. But I really felt that in cycling, both as a sport, but just community-wide, I really didn't see a lot of Indigenous representation. I really didn't see any. When you go to parts of the US where there are larger Native populations, yes, that does exist there. However, in Washington, D.C., where I live, it was much harder for me to find other Native bike riders. And so during the pandemic, I thought, well, this is an opportunity to build this kind of, digital landscape, essentially, to connect us. So I had a very simple, like 3-prong goal, which was to, debunk this idea that, that Native people don't ride bikes. I know that sounds like very simplistic, but it really was something that people had said to me, like I've never met a Native person who rides a bike, right? So I wanted to share our stories and, show pictures of us on bikes doing whatever it is what we're doing, whether we're athletes or we're commuters. Excuse me. I wanted to educate about the land that we all ride on or ride with, because land is, for Native people, there is no separation between land and the individuals. And, in cycling, much like running, we rely on the land to, to enjoy these activities. And for me, it's really important to invest and investigate in the landscapes that give me so much joy and that carry me to all of these beautiful locations on my bike. So even here in DC, I'm a guest on Piscataway land. And so for me, when I moved here, I still am constantly learning, but I really wanted to find a way to appreciate the land and to appreciate the indigenous community here, by learning about the lands that we ride on. So using this platform, on Instagram for Native Women Ride, I would, have people present themselves, and I allow them to use their own language, whether or not it's in their native language, to introduce themselves how they would do in their own communities, and then to talk about the land that they ride on from an indigenous perspective, as well as the indigenous landscapes that they are from. So those are the first two prongs. And then the second one, or third one rather, was to fundraise, see if I could fundraise for issues impacting our communities. So the first fundraiser, for example, was for scholarships. I work in higher education, and for years put myself through school, and there's very few opportunity for Native students to find funding. It's very difficult. And a lot of our students are coming from either reservation life, or they're coming sometimes from very low income backgrounds, and there aren't a lot of scholarship opportunities. So I wanted to use this platform, as a way to gather support for. Initially, it was for scholarships, and then I'll explain a little bit later. But the next two things that evolved were the mutual aid and what are called the mini teams. Excuse me. All right, so laying the foundation for Native Women Ride, it took quite a while. It took maybe about 7 or 8 months to figure out how to build a community online on social media, which was open, like I said, to everybody, but wanting to build it for natives, by natives, essentially, which is really difficult when you are allowing anybody to follow your page. But however, my goal has always been to speak to other Native people, and if followers are not Native, that's fine, because I'm trying to create a community for us, by us. So learning how to sustain that, again, really meant giving agency to the folks that were willing to share their stories. And so, everyone's kind of self-directed their voice. I would send them a couple of prompt questions. But one thing I've learned, when I get together with other Native people, whether it's, at a ceremony or at a powwow, or, at a potluck, the first thing you do is you introduce yourself. You kind of, you ground yourself first in the land that you're in, and then you ground yourself in the lands and that you're from. And so it was really important for me to be able to say, you introduce yourself in your own words, because this is how we would do it if we were actually in community together. So I was kind of working with understanding what would a brick and mortar organization look like, and translating that to social media, knowing, once again, we can't really, control who it is that's going to comment or follow. So I was always really conscious of being protective of the folks who are willing to share their stories. And with that said, I really had to think about the language that has been used historically to describe Native people. And so the page then also became this way for me to educate followers. And, one thing I really try to uplift, which Keisha has been great in teaching me how, is, she talks a lot about Black joy on bikes. And, when she explained what that meant to her, I thought, I tried to keep that sentiment as well, in that, I tried to avoid stereotypes, avoid exploitation, avoid trauma. Not that these things don't exist in our lives, but we aren't defined by them. And so really, one of the things I do share with folks who are willing to share their story is, lead with joy. think about native joy on bikes. What does that mean to you? How do you connect with the land that you ride on, and why is it important to you? And so as time went on, and I was, really kind of trying to figure out, well, what does this community mean? It's not just about sharing pictures of us on bikes. Yes, I can continue to fundraise. I can continue to educate about the land that we ride on, but I was starting to actually build a community. And one thing I realized was, I I've worked with data before, and so I decided to start creating surveys. And I send them out a couple times a year. But what the surveys did for me was it really, um, for me as an Indigenous person, I know that we are not a monolith. There's more than 560 federally recognized tribes. There's 60 plus state recognized tribes, and many individual communities who are not recognized by the state or the federal government. And so, you know, the hope of the surveys was really to find out how I can support the individual riders based on, the kind of bike riding that they're due. As I mentioned, are they interested in racing? Are they interested in mountain biking? Are they just commuters? And finding out, what their needs were based on also their geographic location. And so the surveys have helped me kind of hone down to see, okay, 50% of the folks, what they really need is bike maintenance. They really need someone to pay for their bikes to be fixed. Then you have a smaller percentage of folks who are, want to learn how to do that themselves. And so they're asking me, well, maybe you can help me reach out um, to bike shops. So that was something that I was learning to do. And a lot of folks really just kind of needed clothing. And so that's where the mutual aid came in, and I'll get to that later. But as I was building my community and using these surveys to really figure out how to help folks individually, the people around me in the cycling community and also in the running community, were sharing the page, were, inviting me to, come on to panels, were inviting Native Women Ride to be part of, any kind of talks. They really were encouraging me to build this community. And I have always had a lot of support from the beginning. But again, this idea of reciprocity is such that, and I don't expect if I give to someone for them to, to do the same thing to me. At some point, maybe it'll happen. But my relationship with these other people, the, Black cyclists, POC cyclists, even LGBTQ or disabled cyclists, is, I'm going to do the same for them. And so eventually, it just kind of, the wheel keeps turning and we are taking care of one another. And so, building this community, has been, there's a lot of responsibility, as I mentioned. I have to take on a lot of roles, but I can also lean on my community, not just on, other Native riders, but I can reach out to people like Marzel, like Keisha, like Carmen, and say, what do you think? Or, if there's an issue in the cycling community, I can get their perspective. If they've already had the experience, I can ask their guidance. And so, again, this is also this idea of like building your peer network to strengthen not just, your own community, but because you all are going to strengthen each other's communities. So, once again, just kind of repeating this idea of what does solidarity look like, organizing, doing like kind of like political on the ground organizing. That's what solidarity is to me, is I can show up and I can, fight to change, policies that can make your life better, that are, whatever injustices are existing in your community, and you can do the same for me. And so, I just applied that mind frame to, the bike community essentially. And I feel like a lot of us in these marginalized communities, we're fighting kind of for the same things, but just on bikes. So it really wasn't too much of a stretch. The mini teams are really exciting because I do have to fundraise for them, and they do take a lot of work. It's basically like organizing a tiny vacation. You know, it's like I have to think about where are people going to stay. I have to, look up. I have to put together an estimate of flights, and what is the cost going to be of bringing together 3 to 5 Native people, but to the start line. But the reason why I think it's important to have more than one is because nobody wants to be the only one. Like, we can be the first, but it's no fun. Like, I would rather be the second, third, fourth, fifth if I can be with my community, if I could be with other folks that look like me, that I can relate to. Because when you get there, you want to have that downtime together. You want to be able to share that language and the experience together. It's no fun to be the only person who's representing your community, because again, it's like we're not a monolith. So what I endeavor to do with the mini teams is, for the folks who are interested in racing, is I reach out to race directors, and now they're starting to reach out to me, which is really great. We try to come up with a budget, essentially, that I still do have to do a lot of fundraising for, but it covers everything, because the financial entry into cycling is huge. It's a very, very, high cost, just getting to races, getting your bikes fixed, getting them boxed, like all the travel. And so my goal with, getting more Indigenous people to the start line is to remove that barrier to entry as much as possible, essentially, so that not only can they have this opportunity, but they can endeavor to dream bigger, right? Like, if they're interested in racing, but they really don't know what it means or what it's like, and they've never seen it done before, or they don't ever see anybody who looks like them at the start line, I would like to do the best I can to make that happen, to facilitate that, because it's been given to me. And it was, given to me through Aisha and the Abundance cycling team. I had that opportunity. And so again, just kind of, it's like, you're passing on these opportunities, and you're continuing to support one another and build more diverse spaces. Essentially, it's not just to make yourself feel safer, but so that we are always all coming together and diversifying spaces together. So, keeping Native Women Ride alive, it just takes a lot of imagination. I have to be very creative with how I'm bringing funding in. I'm looking for grants. I have a Venmo set up. However, donations can't be more than $600. So, when you're starting to build these communities, start asking your friends who have community spaces about donations. How are they doing it? Like, don't start from scratch. Nobody has to reinvent the wheel. Just, if you want to start building a community space, go ahead and ask other people who've already done it, and they will tell you what is the easiest path, and what is very difficult. I tried to start a nonprofit. It was very difficult. You need to have a lawyer, board members, a good chunk of change to pay the lawyer, and it's just, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And so the social media page really also gave me an opportunity to start just kind of asking for things. Once I started building up a following, I thought, well, people are sliding into my DMs saying, I want to help you. I want to help you. And, so I created a post which said, I'm looking for a fiscal sponsor. And I just kept having to repost it. And finally, it took a couple of months, but, putting it out there and just being very specific about what I needed help with was how I was going to get it, basically. The mutual aid was the same thing. I have people, using these surveys, and now that I have created relationships with the folks that I support, they can email me now and say, hey, I need a kit. I need, I'm looking for shoes, or, they can just, I let them know, like, just feel free to see, what's possible. I may not always be able to get it for you, but it, it doesn't hurt to just create a post on Instagram and say, there's a family of 5, there's 5 bikes. We need someone to give us a huge discount to fix all their bikes. I mean, maybe nobody's going to answer, but maybe somebody will. And so again, being creative about how you utilize your social media page as a community space, recognizing that there are people out there who want to support you, and being very clear about your ask. Carmen is going to go into the grants and stuff, and so I'll let her kind of talk about that in a second. And I'm just going to, once again, just talk about once you start building your community, and even from the beginning, I wish I had known how to be clearer, honestly. It took me quite a while, but I wasn't like that savvy with social media, and I really had to learn about tagging people, tagging brands, that kind of thing. And again, make a post that says, I need help grant writing. Like, just use your words and put it out there, because there will be someone in the community who knows how to do these things. And again, initially, you don't have to come at it saying, like, if you do this thing for me, I will do this thing for you, because you don't want to put too much on your plate to begin with. Put the ask out there, full stop, and see what comes toward to you. Because once you do start finding folks who want to help you, you're going to be inundated with people saying, how can I support you? How can I support you? But if you don't actually have a way for them to support you, this, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like you're wasting a lot of people's time. You're wasting your own time. So just be very clear about what it is that you're looking for. Are you looking for carpooling? Are you looking for donations? Just be specific. And I have found that the more specific I am, especially with the mutual aid, I can make a post that literally says, I need, size 9.5, whatever shoes. People have these things sitting around in their garage. There's a lot of stuff out there. And one of my goals is to get, the people with the stuff and that have a lot of things to, get those things to the people that need the stuff. Because nobody should be spending money when all this stuff is just sitting in someone's garage. Again, learning to use your voice. If you're not somebody who is a natural, speaker, or is maybe doesn't quite know how to, ask for what they need right away, find a mentor, find somebody whose work you admire. And I would just say, maybe just reach out to them and just say, can I help you? Can I help you do the work that you do so that I can learn? Buy them a cup of coffee, buy them a lunch, do whatever it takes to maybe get someone's advice. And, everybody on this panel and behind the scenes pretty much has taken a lot of time to give me advice about, any number of things. And I'm, forever grateful. And now I can pass on that guidance to anybody who's interested in building communities of their own. So let's see. I think the last thing I would say here, or the last 2 things on this slide, is it's okay to say no. Once you kind of start going and going and going, and people are now kind of saying like, oh, wow, can you come onto this panel? Can you, show up at this bike race? Can you do this, this, and that? Well, I'm just one person. I don't have, like, I don't get paid for this. I would really love to have chapters throughout the US where I can have people, I can distribute some of this work, but that's not the case right now. So I just have to do the best I can. And so I can't say yes to everything. If you are actually going to be getting paid for something and you're not quite sure how much you should be getting paid, again, go to your community, go to the friends that have been in the bike space doing these things already, and ask them, how much should I ask for? Don't walk into these opportunities blindly, especially with large, with brands and organizations. The money is there, so don't start low. You may not always be able to get the highest number, but but know your worth, and start there. So that's my spiel, and we are going to welcome the panelists, Keisha, Marzel, and Carmen. And I believe that Carmen is first up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carmen. I am currently in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm sort of born and raised here. I have worked in and around bikes most of my adult life, either as an advocate in a bike shop, in a bike warehouse, grant writing, fundraising, events. So I am going to be here to talk about what solidarity and liberation can look like through my lens. And my lens is very much one that is comes from a place of doing a lot of fundraising, a lot of grant writing, working from all the way down at the grassroots to all the way with big funders. And hopefully it won't take up too much time. And these first 3 bullet points on here, locate, listen, and learn, what, how, and who, and then connect and be generous. I really want to tie that back to Warina's notions of reciprocity and listening and connecting. And what I think in many ways is most important if you're looking to build capacity and connections in your community is look around where you are. From my perspective, really locating yourself in your local community is very important because it is highly likely that there are people doing the work that aligns with the work you want to do, and they know what resources are or are not out there. So for me, my passion is livable cities and outdoor access. There are a ton of groups in Chicago who are doing this work in different ways. I want to work with them because when we can work together, we can pool our resources, we can get more done. That also means if you're someone like a grassroots group, you don't have a 501c status, which if you want to talk about how the IRS and philanthropy works, let's grab a beer and do that sometimes. For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to just use the rules we have to play in right now. If you are that grassroots group, is there a group in your community that shares in their mission the work you want to do, and they can help you apply for a grant? They can help you get a major donor to give you those funds. You're not going to know any of that if you aren't talking to people, going out, listening, and learning. I know it seems like pretty basic, but I have often been surprised that I am somehow someone who knows more than other people. And the only reason I know that is because I ask questions and I go to a lot of events. And that being said, if you are in a position at a group or with people to, reallocate resources, be generous. We live in a world where we are taught that scarcity is the norm. It's not true. Be generous. If a grant, you didn't get it, but you think it's good for someone else, tell other people about it. Tell other people about donors. It's the only way that, we're really going to build capacity as a movement in whatever part of the movement we're in. Which also is to say, the 4th bullet point, when you're looking to find money, especially in grants, there are, I think, brands especially, because they have great marketing departments, market their grants, and that's cool. And those might be something you want to pursue. It has been my experience that these grants are typically not very large. If you get them once, it is unlikely you will get it again. So when I say flashy doesn't mean robust. What I mean is it might look really good. Consider the project that you might fund with that, because it might not come back the next year. And on that note, people ask a lot, well, how do you write grants? It can be pretty simple, and I would say best way to approach it in a way where you can sort of do it over and over again is to think about your program. Think about your action. What are you going to do in this year? How much money is it going to cost? lowball it so that when you get that money and you do the thing you wanted to do, you can say, actually, we did twice as much. And then they're excited about it. Be realistic. Don't go for grants that are not going to align with your mission or values. You will write a grant, they will not fund you. I have seen it many times. Keep it simple, keep it measurable. The hard truth of it is many grants will not fund your infrastructure needs, your operating costs, your overhead. You got to be a little bit cagey, but just going into the process thinking about what your project is can help. Finally, I don't want to take up too much time. You're probably like, great, Carmen, where's all this money? Good question. Right now, there's a ton of state money, depending on where you're at, for recreation and transpo projects. But also ask around, talk to your friends. If you have friends who work in brands and high places, how does their community philanthropy work? Who do you talk to? Do they have a grants officer? Is their CEO in charge of a foundation? Dig around. You're not going to find everything on Google. You got to sometimes just talk to people. But I will say, New Belgium's bike advocacy grant closes at midnight on Friday. So if you get started now, I definitely want you to win it if you can. But I'm going to pass it to the next person, who I think is Keisha.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. I am Keisha, the founder and lead organizer of Major Knox Adventures. I'm an advocate, an endurance runner, endurance coach, a cyclist, and somebody's future mama. I founded Major Knox Adventures in 2021 when I was looking for escape, like I think most people were. I was finding that during the pandemic that I wasn't feeling the safest always. I was being followed during some of my walks or runs. I was getting frustrated with the social issues going on, and I wanted to find an escape. And I was able to do that on the bike. And I found out that others in my community were also looking for the same. And so we talk about promoting radical joy at Major Knox Adventures. And that's because this is our escape, our opportunity to let all the social issues, the things that challenge us, make us feel small or make us feel insignificant or make us feel like life is hard. This is our opportunity to go out into nature and really enjoy ourselves and find healing and find power outdoors. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about our approach. As Guarina talked about earlier, it's hard to find funding, especially when you first get started. If you don't have that 501c3 status, it can get pretty tough and the funds are pretty low, especially now that the Great Awakening is over. Folks have moved on from this shift of diversity and wanting to support people's movements. And so at Major Knox Adventures, we have to be very creative about where we can find our support and our funding. Some of that comes into who we work with, who we have relationships with. For example, we have the 1928 Legacy Tour. That is a 3-day bike ride from Harlem, New York to Washington, D.C. that celebrates 5 Black women that did a similar ride in 1928. We need a mechanic for that. And so with low funding, we have to look at who do we know within our network? Who do we know within our community that we can look at and we can look to for support? And luckily for us, we have great relationships with nonprofit bike shops, as well as other mechanics that care about our similar community. And we're able to get their support either for free or at a steep discount. We're able to, again, have conversations, as was mentioned earlier, with folks and find out where is the money hiding, where are the opportunities to be creative about our fundraising, our relationship building, so that we can get access to the information or to the resources. Accept support. You know, sometimes when you have these big ideas, these things you want to do and you want to do them your way, right? There's this saying that if you want to get something done, you got to do it yourself. Well, if you want things to be done well, sometimes you have to accept support. There are people who want to help you, who believe in what you're trying to do, who are passionate about the same things you are. And you have to be willing to say, you know what? I got some bigger fish to fry here. So if you can support me with my social media, if you can help me with engaging and making sure that we're organized on the back end, if you can help me with that, that'll free up some time for me to take care of some other bigger fish that need tending to. And then support those that support you or your mission. I mean, we're not going to, we could go by ourselves, but as the saying goes, we can get further when we're with others, right? And so we want to make sure that the people who look out for us whenever we can, in whatever ways are possible for us, we can be there to offer them that support. And our next slide is talking about inclusive language. A lot of what we do within Major Knox Adventures, within other communities, is we want to foster communities where we can feel seen and feel valued and wanted. As we talked about, as Wadena talked about within the cycling industry and within the running community, where I originate from, sometimes it doesn't always feel like a space that's for you. And it goes beyond just saying all are welcomed. It is about the language we use. Are we calling people fast or slower? Are we using male language when we're referring to a group of mixed genders? Are we assuming people's pronouns? These kinds of things can create a space where folks aren't feeling welcome. They're not really feeling seen. And one thing I've learned as a leader within the movement space is sometimes people aren't going to tell you how they feel. They're not going to tell you if they don't feel comfortable. They're just not going to come back. And so we want to practice things like asking for people's gender identities or the way they identify in general. If we're not sure, if they haven't mentioned it or said it, let's ask. We want to be mindful of race and ethnicity and nationalities and cultural terms. We also want to be mindful of these things when certain things are happening in the media socially. Are there certain groups that have a lot of pressure or a lot of attention going on? Making sure that the language we use when we talk about things is inclusive and sensitive. Using gender neutral terms and labels. We want to make sure that we are aware of people's medical conditions and abilities. Like I talked about earlier, are we calling people fast versus slow? Well, that can make a person who isn't as fast feel like it's not a space for them. So using things like slower groups or back of the pack can sometimes make people feel a little bit more included. We also want to try to avoid using acronyms when we're in mixed groups or when we know we might have beginners around us. We might know what an acronym stands for, but others may not. And sometimes that can make them feel excluded and feel like this is not a space for them. And we also want to understand that language is always changing. And so just because using certain words were good 5 years ago doesn't mean 5 years from now that it will also be acceptable. I'm big on history. And a lot of times when I'm digging into newspapers, the terms that were used back in the day used to be colored and Negro. If you use those language to talk to somebody or describe somebody today, you might end up in trouble, right? But that's because language is always shifting. So we want to recognize that and be open to that. And understand that even if you do all these things, you still might get it wrong. And you know what? That is okay if you try and you get it wrong. Figure out what you did wrong, practice getting it right. And that's why I call these things a practice, because sometimes we're going to mess up. We don't want to allow the fear that we're going to get it wrong stop us from at least trying. And now advocacy. There's a quote by Audre Lorde from a piece that she did called "There is no hierarchy of oppressions. It says, I cannot afford to believe that freedom from intolerance is the right of only one particular group. And I cannot afford to choose between the fronts upon which I must battle these forces of discrimination, wherever they appear to destroy me. And when they appear to destroy me, it will not be long before they appear to destroy you. And why I bring this up is because of the community building aspect. We need to understand that there are no hierarchies of oppression, because here's the deal: oppression and bigotry and hatred is a stream that flows. And just because your group might be okay right now, today, doesn't mean tomorrow your group won't be attacked. There's strength in numbers. There's another quote that she has about community building that says, without community, there's no liberation. Only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. But the community must not be shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. This piece comes from The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. And these are valuable words to remember, because in working together, we get to share our experiences. The end goal is that we're all feeling a sense of liberation, because that means we can show up into our cycling spaces feeling empowered and feeling seen and feeling like it's a place that we want to be. And so when we are able to build community with folks within our community, but also beyond our communities who have different opinions, who have different experiences, we're able to broaden our structures and our systems that we build so that we all can feel a place of safety, a place where we can go naked, right? And when we say go naked, again, it's that feeling seen, feeling heard. And you know what? Within those communities, within those differences, sometimes we are also going to be told we're wrong. We might need to broaden and expand our thoughts and how we approach things. Because sometimes when we're within our boxes, we only know our experiences. And when we build relationships amongst different communities, we're able to expand the support and the way that we see the world and see the structures that we are building. And understanding too that a lot of times, and I love to bring history into this, because history has shown us in the past that there have been forces that try to separate communities. That's where that hierarchy of oppression comes in. Well, my experience is worse than yours, so you need to take my experience more serious and you need to focus on mine. But here's the thing: if we work together, we understand that there is that strength in numbers. We understand that by being separated, it weakens our ability to all be able to find comfort and find places that we feel safe and seen. And yeah, I want to thank you all again, and hopefully that helps you all in your movement.
Hello, my name is Marcel Salvador Pinto Mojarro. I am currently in San Diego, California. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm from Tijuana, Mexico, just across the border. I am a full-time professional race mechanic. I have been for the past 6 or 7 years. I've been in the industry for over 15 years. And the 3 topics I will talk about would be how I provide support to my community using my race mechanic skills and organization, how I use empathy to support my community, and also make sure other people who might not necessarily support my community, help them understand why it is important to support other people, even though our plights might not be the same. And lastly, using my industry connections to provide whatever assistance I can to other people around me and show people how they can use their own industry connections to help other people around them as well. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. the ethos of how I built my organization, my race support organization, came from my first year being a race mechanic and being in these spaces that, despite me being someone who's quote unquote in the know or part of the club, I felt I felt like an outsider. I felt uncomfortable. I kind of even felt estranged at times when I would see and hear people say things about women who were racing or non-white folks who were racing, and it instilled the sense in me of like, this can't be it. Like, this can't be how we act as professionals. Um, and so my main thing is to make any space I'm involved in providing support, whether it's paid or unpaid, making those spaces feel safe, and helping others who might be in a potentially hostile space feel safe. How I do those things is being big, being loud, taking up space, making sure that other people know that I am there and that they can also feel comfortable being loud, being seen, and just doing their thing without having to worry about other people othering them or making them feel less than. Uh, there is a large percentage of folks that do what I do that believe that their work, what is the thing that we folks say? It's our job it's your job to start the race. It's our job to help you finish. But I think it's also our job to help people start, show up to the start line, and also walk away from the finish line feeling like they want to do this again. The best ways to do that is not using condescending language, talking to people, making them understand, making them not feel bad about their equipment and what they're using, or the outfit, the clothes they're wearing. It's helping people feel comfortable. Um, Often what I do is provide last minute help at events at no cost to help people get to the start line. It's providing equipment that I have that I bring to these events. Sometimes people show up and the only reason they're able to do these events is because I am providing a piece of equipment. Um, and lastly, I can leverage my relationships with event organizers, um, when I am getting paid, to provide free entries or reduced entries or opportunities for people to show up to these events, making sure that financial hardship or finances in general are not a barrier to entry. Um, as far as being empathic and talking to people, um, obviously being empathic and helping people feel comfortable and safe is the most important thing, but I often have to walk that very fine line where I can open the door and have other people come after me, but not so much that I get pushed out the door and the door slammed in my face. So I've found that empathy is the best way to communicate with people that might have a slightly different idea, when it comes to just people being able to be comfortable and present at an event. And if you sit down and share your point of view and really listen to people, you can see where those fears or discomforts might come from. And sitting and having this one-on-one conversation as two people, I've found great results in helping people understand, yes, maybe I shouldn't be thinking this way, or maybe you are right. Maybe these people are showing up for this, or whatever the case might be. But it's I have a lot of success. I get to have a lot of gotcha moments with people because they let down their defenses and we get to have these really good heart to hearts. Um, and lastly, connecting people is one of my favorite ways in which I can help my community. I very often use the industry and personal connections to provide resources, opportunities to people. Just because an opportunity isn't for me, it doesn't mean that I'm going to hold on to it and not pass it on. Just because I have equipment that I don't want to use, it doesn't mean I'm going to hoard it and keep it stashed away. many times the industry puts us in these positions where we are in a mindset of scarcity, and that there's only a finite amount of resources and people hoard things. I know many people who have been doing this kind of work for longer than I have, who have garages and basements full of equipment that they're just kind of holding on to. And the best way to do that is, if you're not going to use it, then just pass it on to people that will. Even the last thing I'll say is last year I helped someone get media credentials at a huge race here in Southern California, and now they're every time we chat, they just bring it up as a turning point and like something they really appreciated. It doesn't cost anything to introduce people and hope that they do great things together. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to bring on all of the speakers here. Awesome. Thank you all. I'm like highly motivated. And I just have to say that I think this information is not only useful for individuals who are seeking to advocate for their community, start community, and find resources. I think it's also very useful, hopefully, for industry leaders, people who are actually working for these brands, who might be offering these grants and these programs and these resources, the race directors. I think it's really important for those folks to also watch this, to just have a better understanding of what the needs are, what we're like trying to advocate for, and the outlets that we have been using and what's been successful, and just so that they can, I don't know, so that that connection is a little bit easier to make. So hopefully they're also watching. If not, I will definitely recommend it to folks in the industry that I have contact with, just so they understand kind of where we're all coming from. We'll keep the Q&A somewhat short, not too long. We didn't get any questions from the live chat, but I do have a few questions based on what you all presented and talked about. I think something that really stood out to me was how, Guarina, you mentioned this towards the beginning, how social media is not necessarily a safe space, but it is a tool that you've been able to use to try to get these resources. And Keisha also mentioned how, with the passing of the Great Awakening, which kind of took off during the pandemic, how it's becoming a little bit more difficult to kind of get support. People are kind of letting it kind of go to the wayside. They figure they've checked a lot of boxes in the last couple of years. I wonder, especially for folks who have been in the advocating space even outside of social media, especially when you're on the ground, like Marcel mentioned, at races and whatnot, if someone isn't very comfortable with using social media, what maybe are other ways that y'all have found to connect with the local community or find out organizations that are doing work locally? And it can be as simple as like Googling it, I guess, but what are maybe other ways that folks can try to gain access to this information and resources?
I've found that like just being in the community, like there's times where I'm walking through the city and I'll stumble upon something. I'm in DC, land of the Anacostan. And I'll be just walking through neighborhoods and I'll see either a poster about something, somebody's talking about something, maybe there's an actual event happening. And for me, I'm like, oh, shoot, I didn't know this was happening, or I've never heard of these people before. And I'll go home and look into that. And yeah, Google helps too. I mean, a lot of people are like social media centric, but sometimes just being out within your community and going to the community centers. Every time I go to my community center, I always look at like what's on the tables, what's hanging up, what are, listening to the conversations, what are people talking about? It's hard to say you want to support a community that you're not in. I mean, and that's even to be said within my own Black community, right? Like, how do I know what my community wants and needs if I'm never with them, if I'm isolating myself all the time?
Yeah, I would say on that too, for me, sort of old school advocacy groups have always been places where I've been able to volunteer. I really believe in volunteering. I think it's really important. I think you can meet a lot of different people in a city like Chicago, and I know lots of others. There are co-ops, which is where I first learned how to work on bikes through Women Trans Femme Nights at Ciclo Urbano on the corner. But there's like a girls' bike club there, and they have events, and they work with the other co-ops. And so I think going into events and spaces that have existed sort of before social media will get you in touch with a whole different ecosystem that is probably also on social media, but it's just a different experience. And that's just sort of been where I have gotten ground.
I would like to add that I think it's also important to think outside of your age group. A lot of the folks that I really look to when I, do on the ground organizing are my elders. I mean, they've been doing it for 30, 40 years, and they've been out there protesting. Like, they know how this stuff works. They don't rely on social media like we do. And so what that means is, like, you have to actually, like Keisha said, be in community. How are you going to know what people need if you're just there on social media? Like, and I know it's hard, we all have a lot of things to do, but if my elders are showing up to these things, I can show up to these things, right? And I can also support them. And I learned so much from folks who have been doing, work in all kinds of spaces for, years and years and years. And again, that's why, like, I had to take those tools and figure out how to use it on social media. And I have to remind myself that, I need to go back into community. Like, that's actually something that I'm really trying to work on right now.
Yeah, one of the things I've found is a lot of your local cycling groups, clubs, organizations, don't use social media to communicate amongst each other. They use like Telegram or let's see, like Signal or Google Hangout, and it's an alternative to. It's easier to engage with. You're not exposing yourself like you are on social media. And for example, like KRT uses one of these alternative apps. The Philly Bike Expo Squad uses one of these apps, and it's just more manageable.
Thanks, y'all. That's all very great advice and insight. To keep it rolling, we do have 2 questions, and I'm just going to kind of direct each of these at one person from the group. And we'll start with the first one from Alexis. Their question was, as much work as it takes to build community and navigate all these different situations, how do each of you practice self-care to be able to show up entirely at every ride, event, etc.? I guess what I'll actually do instead is if we can go around and each person just mention like whatever the first thing was that just came to your mind about like, this is the most important thing for me with self-care and making sure I'm able to show up fully. Maybe just mention what that one thing really is for you. I'm sure there are a bunch of things, but maybe just mention the one. Keisha, do you want to start?
Yeah. So for me, I like to go to things that I don't actually have to do any of the planning or organizing for, and just be able to show up as a participant really makes me feel good to just be in the space, not having to think about logistics.
Agreed. Marzel?
I very much enjoy Korean face masks and soaking in a hot tub.
Yes. Yes. Carmen?
Yeah, I don't do it all anymore. I don't even try. That is how I have burnt out time and time again. And I also make sure that like the thing I do on my bike for fun, it has nothing to do with anyone else. And I keep that all to myself.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's naps. I'm learning how to nap. Seriously. Just like 20 minutes and I feel fabulous and I'm such a better person.
Yeah, snaps. And learning how to nap. I think that's the thing worth emphasizing there because I have definitely not done it in a long time. And I think in the last year, I've also tried to reintegrate it, especially if it's like an early, long day. I've got things going on in the morning, events at night. It's good to get a little nap in. Cat's got something figured out.
Yeah,
Well, the
one of my
last.
favorite. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go
One of
ahead.
my favorite things to do is nap in the car when we're in a caravan, like in a race. I've trained myself to be able to just knock out, and when I hear the team name over the radio, I pop up and say, "Oh, not an emergency? Cool. Wake me up when it's an emergency." And just go back to sleep.
That's a skill. That is a skill. So our last question from Silpa. Hello, Silpa. Is and this question I feel like we really could spend a lot of time on. And I want to say that if anyone wants to take more time than these couple of minutes to really delve into it, um, Silpa, feel free to DM us directly and we can connect you with these folks or reach out to them directly if you want to hear more. Um, but we can try to give some short answer to how do we avoid performative activism and focus on truly reaching everyone and making sure that we're truly listening. Um, Collabs and conversation with other community orgs to foster intersectionality. I will say that this is something I also wanted to mention is that not just individuals working together in reciprocity, but also organizations that have access to those resources. I think, like you have all kind of mentioned here and there, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are people who have been doing it for a long time, already know how to do it. And I think for organizations that are trying to fill a niche and who have started anew because they have their own people who they want to help who haven't had the help before, I think those collaborations are really important. But for y'all, how do you think, what are the best ways to avoid the performative activism and trying to make sure you really hear folks out?
I mean, I don't focus on I have a community, and that was the first thing for me is like, who is my community? Who am I trying to target? Like, and that's what I focus on. And I mean, if other people want to hang out and like see what's going on, that's cool. But my energy is not really for anyone but my community. You can't control who's going to be performative, who's not. And so I found it's better to not focus on what you can't control. And I think from that collaborative section is like the more you put yourself out there to meet different people, go to the different races or go to the different areas where you know there'll be folks that have similar missions or goals or interests, you will run into folks who you can find alignment with and be able to have those conversations and brainstorm and come up with ways that both of your missions or your goals can intersect with each other.
And I would say that just speaking to organizations, brands, people who have the money, from my perspective, is that if you're going to take the time to make a public statement about wanting to support one of our communities, just know that, like with any social justice movement, it's going to be a long-term relationship. It's not going to be this one-time affair. It's not going to be, let me just, a drop in the bucket. It's the way that if you want us to trust you, then you need to stick around and you need to show up, and not just like by giving your money, but show up physically to these places, right? And meet us where we are. Don't ask us to come to you, because oftentimes we maybe can't afford it. Whatever it is, maybe whatever the thing is, like if you have the money and you go out there and say, I want to support, diverse communities, then do it. Don't just do it once. Try to figure out how to set aside those finances for a long period of time, or come up with an agreement where we're going to shake hands and you're going to do it for 5 years. Like, don't keep me hanging. And I think that's like a big thing with these, community groups, is that we need the funds, right? We need support, but I want to build relationships with people who want to invest financially, who want to invest emotionally, and it's like there's a lot of mistrust in our communities because we have people kind of dipping in and dipping out. So that would be the performative activism, I would say. I say, like with Keisha, we're working with our community. That's who we're thinking about. But a lot of the performative stuff comes from the folks who have the power, right? And so, just kind of thinking in that way, is you make the effort, but think about doing it long term.
Yeah, that's a very true thing. Bikes aren't going to just stop being fun after that first scholarship, and they're not just going to stop wanting to. It's not. Sure, there are some people who try the thing one time or get to go to this great place one time and it's a good experience. And there are also people who go and they're like, you know what, actually, I don't think this is fun. I don't think I want to do a gravel race again, and that's fine too. But I think I also agree that there needs to be some sustainability because the systems themselves aren't changing. These are just like temporary band-aids for individual experiences. So I agree that thinking about the sustainability of the support is really important.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work that's happening at a grassroots level that if they just had the resources, they could really expand and really make an impact. But I think someone mentioned this earlier. It's like sometimes you feel like you're fighting for scraps, or that the resources don't exist when they do. And it's like, if you make an investment 1 year, we have to understand that if you were to continue to support these things, they could actually grow and blossom. And you as a company or an organization with the resources can blossom with these organizations, these movements that are taking place.
Yeah. Y'all heard it here. Y'all heard it here. And if you didn't hear it all, this will still live on the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to go back and watch this as many times as you'd like. Please share this video with your community, with folks that are interested in trying to do some of the work or offer some of the support. I also want to encourage y'all to follow all of the speakers here. Some of them have their social media handles here. If not, you'll be able to rewind back and see that lovely slide Guarina had of everyone's social media and their organizations if you want to support them directly. I want to thank everyone again for their time here and for presenting all of this information. I hope it carries forth and folks are able to make more of an impact for our communities. And thanks to our sponsors for helping us put this on and be able to value our speakers here and everyone's time. A special thanks to our ASL interpreters, Sarah and Eli, for helping us with the interpretation here. And stay tuned. We will have another workshop next month. And at this time, we would like to just say thank you all. And we'll see you out there on the bikes. All right.
Thank you.